Good evening, Battle Creek, and welcome to another edition of Our View, the show about our seat from poverty and how it affects our corner of Calhoun County. Today we're going to talk about child support, foster care systems, and things from a perspective of a mother in those systems and related to the myths around those systems.
So last show we talked about the perspective of fathers in the system, meaning Children's Protective Services system or the court system locally, and the plight that they face trying to be fathers when they're separated from mothers. Pretty interesting show. Left Field gave some pretty good testimony, but today we want to talk about she's a single mother. We were supposed to have a guest today, one of our members, Sierra Hawkins, and she was unable to join us, but did give us permission to share her story because it's important kicking off this subject. So Sierra shared that she was never with her child's father. They lived separately always. But since the beginning, he's always been involved. So he's always paid child support, always kept a job, always took his kids on the weekends, and has always been as supportive to Sierra and the children as he could. Sierra's issue is this. Yes, he has a great job, and he's been able to keep that great job, and he's been able to do cool things. I've had the children, so I didn't go out to get that really great job. I didn't get to pursue the career thing because I had the kids. Also, Sarah Brown, also another story that I'm free to share. She became a mother at 17 years old. She was in high school. The father, also in high school. Mom, Sarah, got custody of the child, and Dad got some liberal visitation and a small child support order. The issue is he got to finish high school. Right. He got to go on to college. Now, we know Mom could have done these things too. We know that. We help women set up for success every day to do that. But it was more of a challenge for her to have to do that because she had the burden of the child. Like, I could clearly see what Sierra was saying to us. When you're a single mom, you have the burden of doing those things, of providing. And when you want to go to school full-time, work full-time, it's not in your cards because you have the kids. I think, though, that what we have came to, Battle Creek, is that this really isn't about the dads or the moms. It's about both. It's about family wellness. And we teach some life enrichment classes at Co-op. We teach resiliency to women. And we teach nurturing parent to any parent who wants to take it, referrals for men and women both. Teach bridges out of poverty to our training candidates. We teach classes. But we really work with women. When people come through our classes, just like Left Field that was on our last edition, he comes for classes. When moms come through, they come from classes, we introduce them to our membership, and they immediately begin to get supportive services that can help them. Unfortunately, we do not offer that to males. Now, we will put men in our training program, correct, Kayla?
Yes.
So we do that, but they don't get the additional co-op services. They don't get to shop in our store. They don't necessarily get case management from me or Val. They get training specifically. And typically, if there is a female who comes through co-op and is a member and she has a significant other or a partner, we will offer training or classes to the partner, but the services are delivered to the mom, which is okay in our case because I don't know if anybody noticed it in our name, but it's the Woman's Co-op, so we are that network. We have, Val's been there almost the same 20 years that I've been there, and we have played with the idea of mingling groups.
Yeah.
The problem with it is that there's this nature thing that says that men are supposed to want women and women are supposed to want men in the traditional sense. And when you put them together in a network, they fraternize, and it never really turns out well. So we've kept the focus on moms and the women. But we're really starting to see that at the core of this, whether parents stay together or separate and become co-parents, this is really about our community looking at family wellness. How do we keep the family intact in a way that's beneficial to the children and both parents, even if those parents aren't going to stay together under one roof. Opinions, thoughts?
So I think in today's society, it's become the norm. I don't want to really say the norm, but it's become more normal to see a mom who has 2 or 3 children in tow, and then you'll say, "Oh, are these your children? Oh, they're so cute. Oh, well, yeah. Well, their dad's here, their dad's there." I don't think that we see as much involvement with the fathers as we should. But what I do see is that when you do have a mom who has the children's father involved in their life, you do see a great amount of involvement. So I think for a lot of the folks that we deal with, it's either a lot or none. I don't really think there's a lot
like
in the
families, yeah, there's not a middle ground. You either see a father who's really involved and with the mom, or you see a father that's just completely absent and there's nothing.
Right.
And so that's kind of interesting too, you're right.
Right.
I do think that we are guilty of the same thing that we're accusing the systems of being guilty of. We don't really ask, well, where is dad? And we don't, when we're setting goals, like Kayla, you set the goals for these folks, you're training them. You're setting these goals, and we look at financial, we look at housing, we look at mental health. Like, we take such a holistic look at these women and what they need to be whole. But nowhere in there are we looking at the family dynamics, really. I mean, we do kind of briefly look, but we don't set goals there. And we don't look at where these absent fathers are or how we can engage them.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, so looking at, like, having you say, like, the holistic view for the women and setting goals for the families and the absent father, I feel like the last episode you asked Jamel, like, if he's going to help us change the world, and I feel like that's what it would take, is changing the world, because it is such a big change. Because I feel like, and Val touched on it too, like, just the way the system and way the society has, like, for mothers, we are like the homemakers, and we take care of the children, and the fathers are typically the breadwinners, or they're not at all, and regardless, like, the mother's still there to take on her part plus the rest. And I think that, like Val said too, having seeing that, like, whether they're co-parenting, how much better the family works versus having an absent father. Like, I think that is huge. And being able to ask the candidates, like, well, what about the absent father? And maybe getting the information there and seeing if there is a way, like, well, can you guys work together in some way? And then, like, from there, create, like, a goal list for the family thing. I think it's super doable, and it's amazing. Just from my own experience, like, my mother and father weren't together. I also have a brother who has a different dad than, we share the same mom, but same thing, like, he was there for a little while, but then he wasn't at all. So there are a lot of different dynamics, but I understand that, like, even though I knew my parents weren't together, I always knew, like, that they both loved me, and it was okay.
But not true for all children, right? Like, statistically, Val, you have statistics that show that children, and which, I mean, this just makes sense, children are better off when both parents are involved.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be in the home together. They don't have to be together and be a couple. Even in situations where both mom and dad have gone on and developed other relationships, the children are more well-balanced and healthy when all parties are participating together for the welfare of this child. We always talk from the perspective of poverty. I don't think this is something that poverty owns exclusively, but that is primarily our families. I think that if you look at some of the stories or, see these different cases, there's usually a lot of trauma around it, right?
Yeah.
It never really is, and we talk exhaustively to our moms about this. there isn't very often times where it comes down to the best interest of the child.
Right.
It comes down to how I feel about the father, or what the father did or didn't do, or how he's been around. Instead of, let's encourage to get whatever we can get from dad because it's in the best interest of the child.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we see that. Now, do I necessarily know if that happens in middle class homes as well? I'm sure it does. I don't know if it happens more in poverty, and I don't have any stats to back that up. And we don't typically see families that are economically at that middle class level. Our families are at poverty or below. But drama thrives this situation for sure. And usually the extended families are all caught up in it as well, right?
Right.
You know, I look at some of these stats on the paper, and it's disturbing to me. Like 75% of all adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers come from fatherless homes. That's 10 times the average. 75%. So then, you know, and then you look at 70% of youth in the state-operated institutions come from fatherless homes. 85% of all youth in prison come from fatherless homes. When you look at these stats, it's not hard to unpack that having a fatherless home or not having contact with your father makes a big difference. I had 2 girls and a boy, and my daughter's fathers were mostly engaged. I mean, they were decent. But my son's father had a life that had substance abuse and dysfunction in it, and it was my own personal choice to say, if you want to see your son, you have to see him in my home where I can govern what's happening. And that was a protection thing for me, and I don't think I was wrong about that. Of course, the father didn't take advantage of that, and so my son, I think in his 18 years of being a child, seen him maybe 3 times. My son had a very good life. He had 2 sisters who loved him dearly, older sisters. He had a mother who worshiped him. He had a good life. But if you talk to him now, that is a missing piece for him. And it's a missing piece that visits as he becomes a father. It's a missing piece as he goes out in the world to become this man. And I didn't realize, okay, so some things are laughable, like when you teach a little boy to use the bathroom, and my son learned sitting down until my brother saw him one day and was like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, okay, so I taught him and the equipment's different. So there's the funny things, right? But then there's the not so funny things. I couldn't teach my son how to change a tire or how to, you know, and there weren't male role models around to do that. And now my son, when he gets in a room full of adult males at work or in social situations, feels inadequate and sometimes feels inferior because my son is used to being with a pack of women and not a pack of guys. And you would think, well, he went to school and he had guy friends. That didn't change things. He didn't have those male role models. I think in some situations, you guys, even if we start, which, by the way, folks, we're going to, in the fall, start looking at family wellness classes, some domestic violence classes, some things that might more cleave our families together and offer supports to the entire family and not just the women.
Yeah.
But we're not going to change the world by doing that. And I think that in some situations, as much as it might stink, you're not going to be able to get fathers involved. So in those situations, is it just a matter of looking for good male role models? Big brothers, big sisters, like male role models that can have an impact.
Yeah. I think just upon like having these conversations and looking at the statistics, like it seems like our men just need more support, you know, and it seems like that's drastically affecting the children and women of the world, which goes on into our extended families and in our homes, like how much their absence, for whatever reason it may be, like they just need a lot more support.
And I don't think that in the myths and stereotypes, we don't talk enough about the fathers who meet a mother who already has a couple of children and fathers those children along with any future children. or who don't have children with the women but accept their children and father their children, and all the really great dads in the world. Like, I don't think we celebrate that enough. I definitely know we didn't do it at co-op. I mean, not that I should probably say this on air, but we get accused a lot of being the she-man woman or man-haters club because we advocate so strongly for women, but I don't feel guilty for that either. That's our job, to advocate for these women and to be able to give them the tools and the resources they need to be successful for them and their families. But I just do feel a little bit guilty that we were always so one-sided in the equation of just thinking the world is filled with deadbeat dads, which we're now finding is
Not always the case.
not always the case. And that, you know, statistically, if we want to do a better job for our kids, again, I mean, Val pulled a lot of really good data. Do you have some of that statistics
Yeah, so,
right here?
yep.
So the strengths of fathers' presence, it increases infant mortality, changes low birth weights, almost not cancels out, but improves emotional and behavioral problems, obesity, poor school performance. I mean, when I looked at this, I thought, well, you can't say that every kid is just going to thrive in all these areas, but I do believe that statistically here it shows that when mom and dads are both involved, children are healthier physically, emotionally, mentally. I just think that goes without saying. And when there must be lower risk to the pregnancies too, because of the fathers are involved in supporting, the mother has more time to rest.
Right.
Probably isn't working a 60-hour week. You know, there are just dynamics that change within that situation. So I think that those very much could be true.
Some of the stats that I pulled that just like were wow to me. Children who were born between 1960, the post-war generation, 87% of those children grew up with two biological parents who were married. Today, and this was stats that were taken from 2019, only 68% of them have their entire family intact for their entire childhood. The portion of children living with one parent, again in the 1960s, was 9.1. And today, it's 20.7 children live with one parent. So that's a huge jump, you know. And
I think that's another discussion too, because we've talked about this before too, right? The breakdown of the American family, and that's, oh my gosh, another onion that we could peel layers away of.
Right.
But that's definitely influenced it for sure. Val pulled this too, National Fatherhood Initiative. The Father Absent Crisis in America, and it gives you some stats that says research shows when a child is raised in a father-absent home, they are affected in the following ways: 4 times greater risk of poverty. Well, that makes sense. You don't have 2 incomes, you have 1.
right.
More likely to have behavioral problems. Well, that makes sense too. Mom's working, and mom is stressed out because she's raising these kids by herself, and sometimes that male influence makes a difference in behavioral issues with boys and such. 2 times greater risk of infant mortality. That one I didn't really understand. More likely to go to prison, more likely to commit crime, 7 times more likely to become pregnant as a teen, more likely to face abuse and neglect, more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, 2 times more likely to suffer obesity, and 2 times more likely to drop out of school. I mean, I thought some of this was kind of harsh, to be perfectly honest. I really did. Like,
And I could kind of see the 2 times more
but you can see the
likely.
connections.
2 times more likely to drop out of school. I can kind of see that because, you know, if you're a child, say for instance, you're a male child in a home where you see your mom doing all of these things and she's trying to struggle, and you know that you can go out and get a job relatively easily. So you drop out of school to get a job to support the family or to support whatever habits or things that you need, you know, to try to relieve some of that pressure. from
Or
your
the
mom.
structure's not always there for you to do it, right?
Right.
I mean, I know I grew up with a single mom, and I had a lot of responsibilities. My mom worked. And so when I came home from school, I had responsibilities. And I feel like if my parents would have stayed together, maybe those responsibilities wouldn't have been as heavy.
Right.
First of all, I don't think my mother would have worked full-time out of the home. Given the generation that I grew up in, that wasn't the norm. I mean, it's more of the norm now. But I just feel like the absence of that does increase the burden on a child. It changes the whole dynamics of the family.
Right.
Yeah.
Kaylee, you haven't weighed in too much on this subject today. Is it personal?
I think I'm just listening a lot because I'm not sure that I have enough experience to speak from. And it's really hard for me because a lot of these, because I can be a little bit of a dreamer, I guess. So hearing the stats and what statistics say about these things, like I can identify with a lot of them because of how I believe like my own system works within me, and how I feel like a lot of the things going on around us do come back to mental health. And having both parents and the emotional support that's there, or when a woman is pregnant and the dad is there and the dad is kissing on mom's belly and like the baby can hear his voice and all those things, like even though the baby is not born, like it's alive, like the baby is in there and can still hear surroundings and things like that, and can still suffer trauma even though the baby hasn't been born yet.
Absolutely.
So I think that, from day one, and then going through life and not having both support, all these things that is in these papers, like, it makes sense because, without support, especially for people in poverty who are just trying to get by day by day by day by day, well, same for a child without a mother, without a father, they're not getting the whole package. So, yeah, I like to think that I understand how some of these things can happen to us and the way we've been brought up in the stuff that we carry and have been able to overcome, and how children are living in these families and not knowing that they're going through these things. And maybe they won't know until they're older and they're like, oh, that really messed me up, and just having those awarenesses, I guess, for parents like myself and having young children and co-parenting and having different situations in my own situation, multiple situations, just having those awarenesses that like the support and not like my feelings against one person or another, but the support for my children is like number one.
Very well said. Thank you. We're gonna wrap it up with some final thoughts. I think for me, there used to be a program in Battle Creek, gosh, I don't even know how long ago, probably about a half a decade ago, called the Fatherhood Program. And it gave support specifically to fathers who were trying to be in their children's lives, help them, file court papers, just do different things. Kind of the same thing that we do for the moms, in a sense, but they did it for the fathers. But that program is since folded, and as we were researching for these shows, there isn't anything anymore. Like, that was the only program that existed. So we're not the one-stop shopping only place where a woman can go to find the supports that we offer. Some things, like the network and some of our resources, you're only going to find it at co-op. But I really was pressed to find something that supported fathers in the same way, even though there are programs. The one that I didn't know about, maybe you can tell me more about, the alternatives. Do they support both parents?
I'm not sure. I know Alternatives is very supportive for young moms and new moms, as well as moms who are in poverty. But I'm pretty sure they would support both parents, but I don't know for sure. Maybe
We should
that's,
check into that, Kayla.
yeah.
You need to put that on our to-do list.
Oh boy.
So we can research this a little more. So one of the things I guess I would challenge Battle Creek with this evening is, how important is it to have a program that supports fathers and helps them to move through these systems and get the same supports and the strength that they need to be good fathers the same as the mothers do. And so, again, like I always say, there's our number, there's our website. If you go to the website, there's emails for each of our staff members. We love to hear your feedback. We love to have further discussions on these subjects. I think we bring them up kind of to toss them out there and see what Battle Creek thinks and wait for the feedback. We love to be challenged about it. We don't love being told we're wrong, but we accept it. None of us really like that, huh? I think it's a co-op thing. Thanks, Battle Creek, for joining us, and please join us next time when we'll be discussing more topics relative to poverty in Battle Creek. Say goodnight, you guys.
Good night.